All right, so, first, language is important, right? We gotta make sure that everybody's aligned on the conversation we're gonna have. What's an improvement? You gotta go from one place to another place. You gotta know where you're at before you can improve. All right, so, you gotta start at position A and you gotta go to B, right? Okay, y'all can put those down now. Thank you very much. There'll be a little extra in your check this week for that. But y'all would think that may be a straight line, right? Straight line, A to B, improvement initiative, A to B. We're gonna get there just like that, right? Does it ever work like that? No, it's arduous, right? So sometimes you gotta think about what does good look like? I can go from A to B, but is the B the 100% or is the B the 50%? Because if I'm starting at 0, 25% is looking pretty good of a change or an improvement, right? So you got to choose for yourself where you want to be when you discover what your vision is, what your goal is. Because if you don't know what your vision or your goal is, how are you going to get where you want to be? Right? You got to know where you're at today, and you got to create that vision or that space where you want to be. Yeah, sometimes you're way in the bottom. Maybe getting up there to the top is your goal, right? But does that mean that if you get a halfway up that you didn't succeed? You absolutely did, right? And communicating the success of where you're at and what you've done. So a couple of thoughts about improvement initiatives that transcend all of improvement initiatives. There's 3 elements, right? Being clear, being authentic, and there's one more. You got to start. Because if you don't start, you're never going to improve, all right? The clarity piece is all about the path that you're headed on. Demystifying the action. Lots of folks live in a 3-foot world. Your craftsmen, they're living in a 3-foot world. I've got my work order. I've got my direction. I've got a broken piece of equipment. I've got to fix something. They don't know necessarily the actions that they're going to be taking and how it impacts the business. They live in that 3-foot world. You have to demystify what that improvement initiative is going to be for them so that it's meaningful for them. Because then they understand, the actions that I take have implication on the business. Authentic is, if you do not walk the walk and talk the talk, they will call BS on it every time, right? So when you decide, hey, we're going to have an improvement initiative, you have to be with them at the same place, same time. You have to be a part of that team. You just can't say, hey, this is the way that it is. And then start, right? So the idea about starting is that if you just had a 1% improvement every day, at the end of the year, you'd have a 365% improvement. That's crazy if you think about that. But the reality is that we're not going to be at work 365 days a year. So 250, is that okay? We're there? All right, so next slide, please. Oh, that's me. So anybody got examples of improvement initiatives that you've embarked on? Or you're challenging or thinking about? Okay, I won't push y'all. So maybe improvement initiatives might be related to cost. Hey, our budget's way over. We've got way too much cost. And it might be related to overtime or how much spare parts, or we had to expedite something and somebody's asking me why I had to spend extra, or hey, its cost is the long lead, or whatever the issue is with cost. Maybe downtime. Why is this line always down? Why are we having that problem? Right? Maybe it's a quality related element. Right? So these are things to understand, where you might want to improve. What about high absenteeism? Do you think that that's a problem for your organization? If they're not feeling it, if they're not showing up, if they're not enjoying the work, granted, everybody wants to show up and they want to do their job and they want to do it well, right? How do we remove the roadblocks for folks to be able to do their job? So every day we walk into the office and we ask, okay, what's the problem that we're going to have to deal with today? Is a motor fail? Is motor replacement an improvement initiative? Maybe, but maybe not, right? It might be just maintenance, right? We had a failure, we got to replace it. Maybe if it's reoccurring, then we got to think about the improvement initiative tactics. But every day when you walk in, you got to take care of your problems, and then you got to think about continuous improvement. Every day you got to be thinking about continuous improvement. So when you think about continuous improvement, what drives you to understand what element of continuous improvement you want to tackle, right? So, when you think about the problems that you have, somebody's gonna, you might say, hey, we've got this problem, and somebody else in the organization says, that's not a problem. That's not affecting me. I don't need to improve that. So you always have to ask yourself, can you measure the problem? Can you break it down in a way so that, when you say it's a problem and you show the data, that they accept, yep, that's a problem. It's hitting my goals. I can't get there from here because of the problem that we have, and we can all agree, right? And then later, when somebody else is in the cafeteria and that other person, you told them about this problem, and they tell somebody else, hey, this is a problem we have, and they go, here's the data behind the problem. Now you've got an advocate that's already talking about the problem that you've got and understanding the aim of where the organization is, just from a little improvement initiative, is key for people to understand, how do we get from point A to point B? So Peter Drucker, if you can't improve what you don't measure, so if you don't have the data to understand the problem, you don't know the problem well enough, right? And so some people are just going to say, we don't have the data in our CMMS. Well, maybe the improvement initiative is you got to start thinking about, how do we get the data? Because we know that it's a problem, but how do we get the data to actually define how big of a problem is it? Is it just a little problem, or is it a big problem? What do we need to do from an improvement initiative to get the data? So maybe that's there. Maybe that's the thing to consider. So when you can measure it, then you can understand it and you can improve it. Once you know what the problem is, and you can measure it and you can quantify how big or how bad it is, you might want to gather a team. And you might want to do some, do you know why? Right? And anybody that sits at their desk and defines that they know the solution based on their esteemed knowledge of the years that they've been in the field without going and talking to someone, same time, same place, in the place of whatever it is, you're going to fail, right? We cannot define solutions and the why of what the problem is on our own, all right? So anybody, what does that look like to you? Anybody seen this image before? So for me, it looks like, somebody with a device and there's a gentleman on the right-hand side that's alarmed, like, what are you doing, right? And so our data is just like that, because, when you look at the data, it's going to tell you just one thing, right? Data is just data. It doesn't tell you the whole story. So you got to step outside of the box of the context of the conversation and make sure that the information that you're using is going to help you move your improvement initiative further, okay? So don't just look at your data and say, the data says that this is the problem, this is the solution. Because that's not going to get you where you want to do. You need the team. You need all of your stakeholders to be engaged. They need to help you define the solutions to your improvement initiative, the options, more than you. You just need to create an opportunity for the organization to move forward. You can't move the organization forward. You have to create a space that allows the organization to move, figuring out how that framework and the facilitation is going to be the fun part. All right, so once you have that data, that information, you're going to have to interview people. You're going to have to do some analysis. You're going to have to figure out the why. Why is this happening? Because you can't go to solution until you know the problem and the why you have the problem. So, maybe it's a little bit of fault tree analysis. And so these are problem-solving ideas So when you think about improvement initiatives, you might be going, well, why are we talking about root cause analysis? Well, you got to do something to figure out what your solution is, because we're not even at the implementation stage. We're defining what the solution might be for the problem that you've identified that you can measure. Maybe a little fishbone or some number of whys. You know, the key for all of these, you might go, well, we don't have anybody that knows how to do these things. You know, just like I said before about the improvement initiative, start. There's enough information out there that you can improve your knowledge based on free information for what that looks like. Or you can ask somebody. Maybe the improvement initiative is, hey, we want to do a pilot on how to learn about one of these problem-solving techniques. You know, you can't do one of these things but without including other activities and knowledge to make it happen. So after you know why, and you review you notice, do you know why? Yes. Well, data review and interviews. Do you know why? No, data review and interviews. It doesn't matter whether you know the answer. You must do data review. You must analyze. You must interview. You must talk about with the stakeholders, because if you don't get that, you're not going to improve. So at that point, maybe you've done enough interviews and data analysis before you get paralysis that you're going to develop some options, right? And so when you think about those options, think about the options. So improvement initiative, we're not even at the implementation stage. We're not even kicking it off. We're creating an opportunity for success because we're fully baking our improvement before we ever go to implement it. People can't say why I'm not on board for the improvement initiative. They're saying, yes, you did engage me. Yes, we have the data. Yes, it is a problem. Yes, we have good solutions. Now it's just, how do we implement the solution? Options analysis. When you look at your different options, you have to consider the cost and the timing and the resources and all these things, and one might be easier to do than another. But if you don't think about the different options, you might be leaving some opportunity on the table. So when you think about your options, you know, how do you validate that you actually improved? You have to be able to measure the improvement. You measured the problem. Yes, we know how bad it is. We can measure the problem issue in the back at the beginning, but you have to be able to measure the improvement option that did it make a change or did it not? From there, you're into a process for change management, identifying, you know, what the current state is, restating, what's the future state, what's our vision, where is our B, where are we going to? And then communicate, tell everybody, demystify it, make sure that the people are outside of their 3-foot circle, help them understand what the improvement it is you're gonna develop and move on for. And then, you know, it's not special. Change management, okay, this is what we're gonna do, plan, do, check, act, move on. So the end is easy. It's getting the beginning part that you have to be prepared for. So this might be a way to frame up an improvement initiative, right? It might not be everything, but it's a place to start preparing to kick off an improvement initiative because you can measure it and you understand how bad it is. You've included your stakeholders. You've got some options identified. You can measure the solution. And now you're going to roll it out to your organization. So this follows the DMAIC process. You got to define your process, the issue. You got to measure it. Analyze the issue. Improve the issue, and then control the change that you made by validating, yes, we continue to make. Maybe you have to retrain. Maybe you have a different group of people that comes in, right? So, I really like the DMAIC process because it allows you to be very scientific in your problem solving. So back at the beginning, we talked about if you don't know where you're going or where you're at, how do you get improvement? So you have to understand where your goals are. You have to understand your roadmap, if you will. You got to set that goal, and then you just take the action. Communicate with others. Hey, these are the things that I want to do. This is where we're going, and this is how we're going to get there. So to restate, for improvement initiatives, you got to be clear. You got to make sure that people understand where you're going. The authentic piece is walking the walk and talking the talk about the improvement, understanding how bad something is, and start. And the connection for the reliability uptime elements is your performance and indicators and your continuous improvement. So the idea of key performance indicators that you would measure routinely at some interval, weekly, monthly, quarterly, what have you. Let those indicators drive what improvement initiative you might want to have. So, and if you don't have performance indicators, that maybe that's an improvement initiative. Oh, we don't have anything. We want to improve, but we don't have KPIs. So that's an opportunity. All of these things will get you started.